Yes, so our next speaker is called Valentina. So I don't know if she's already here. I think while we wait, she's gonna be talking about like her title of the presentation is Can a machine learning system outperform humans in emotion recognition? So I think she's here already. Awesome. So hi Valentina, how are you today?
Hello, I'm good. How are you guys?
Very good. So, yeah, you can start talking about your presentation. So, yeah, what are you going to be talking about now?
Okay, so can I share my screen? I think. Uh,
Yes.
okay. Um. Okay. Uh, I think I need to quit and reopen. Quit and reopen in order to share my screen because I needed to like change the settings.
Okay.
Sounds good, Valentina. See you very soon. In the meantime, we'll hype up once again our amazing cloud skills challenge. For every module you complete, we're going to plant a tree. That is so cool. I'm going to be like, first of all, I'm going to do it once this conference is over, and then I'm going to tell all my friends to do it because that is probably the coolest initiative I've ever seen for a conference ever. And then I think, oh yeah, the final piece. If you email the completion to, you can be entered into an Amazon gift card, which is extra cool. You just planted trees and could potentially win a gift card.
Yes, definitely. And remember, the email that you need to email that is aiconf at globalai.community. So I think in the comments of this conference, you can see like the link and then you can see all the details and things like that. So yeah, just don't forget to complete your skills, your cloud skills challenge. Oh, I think she's back.
Hello.
Hello.
Um, can now share my screen. I think.
Awesome.
Can you guys see my screen?
I cannot see it yet, but I think we're almost there.
Share screen. Can you guys see my screen now?
No.
Okay. Uh,
Please stand by. You might even be icy on my end, Valentina. You're frozen right now, so maybe it's a Wi-Fi connection thing.
Yeah.
system preferences. Can you guys hear me?
I can't hear you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, do you guys know why I might not be like letting you guys see my screen even though I think I'm sharing it?
Um, my if I were to guess, I would say currently on my end your camera screen looks frozen. So my initial hypothesis is maybe it's a Wi-Fi disconnection where it's like, oh, maybe I've shared my screen, but the actual maybe it isn't working. So maybe oh wait, it just
Yes.
appeared. We
Yes.
did it.
Definitely.
Awesome. Yes, we can see your
Okay.
screen. We can see you. We're ready to go. Woo! Thank you for your patience, everyone in our audience. And this is going to be an amazing talk. Stay tuned. Stick around.
Okay. So, this is my talk. My name is Valentina Zhang, and today I will be talking about whether or not AI can outperform humans in emotion recognition. As I'm sure you guys have heard throughout today, there are so many ways that AI can like outperform humans in so many different fields, such as like playing chess or art or like better and safer drivers. And so my research that I started kind of over the summer is that if this trend continues, could there be a day in which AI is able to understand and express emotions better than humans can? And would that allow AI to eventually have consciousness? And these are like some of the questions that I wanted to answer. And so let's get started. So first of all, I just wanted to start off with how we recognize emotions. There's many ways. For instance, this can involve like the tone of the voice, language, gestures, body language. But I think one of the key ones, which is what I focused on, is facial emotions. So in the past, researchers have classified 6 major facial expressions. These are happy, sad, fearful, angry, surprised, and disgusted. Throughout more research into what emotions actually are and what emotions are actually able to be expressed on faces, people have identified 21 different facial expressions. So you can see them listed here. But these are often like very difficult to identify accurately, and therefore for my research, I focused on the 7 that was established in the 20th century. And so my research is mainly focused on in a field of medicine and medical care, but there are many ways that facial expression and emotion identification can be very helpful. So this involves like education, robotics, computing, like human and computer interface in order to make the communication between humans and robots feel more natural. And people expect that this emotion recognition will become a $56 billion industry by 2024. So that is very exciting. And you might be wondering now, like, since machines don't have emotions, since they currently don't have consciousness, how can we make them better at recognizing it? But this, in fact, is answered by, first of all, that facial expression is like a low-level response in your brain, and therefore there's patterns to it that machine learning is actually particularly good at recognizing. And additionally, since machines don't have emotions themselves, it cannot interfere with their understanding of emotion. So if you experience an emotion, this might influence how you understand other people's emotion, but machines don't have this problem. And so let's imagine there is like a contest today between humans and machines in recognizing emotions. And I did some research and I found that currently today, humans have an accuracy of 68% accuracy in recognizing emotions through pictures of faces. This is actually like a pretty surprisingly small percentage, at least in my opinion. I don't know about you guys, but I found that humans are actually not that great at recognizing emotions and faces. On the other hand, a convolutional neural network has been found to be the best at detecting emotions. And so the best one so far in machine learning is 65%. And while machines are still worse than humans at detecting emotions, they're actually pretty close. So now let's build a machine learning system that can actually outperform humans in emotion recognition. And so throughout this process of trying to build a machine that can be better at humans, I found 4 observations through different areas that helped me come to my system. And so first, it's a scientific observation that I made, which is a psychological discovery that humans perceive things differently based on the different stimuli that they receive. So one person might focus on a certain part of a person's face, while other people look at different stimuli. And the question is, can we help machines learn better by kind of copying what humans do? And so thus, I made a model. It is an image-trained convolutional neural network model. And this kind of matches the fusiform face area in our brain, which is a certain part of our brain in recognizing faces that doesn't show any preference for the singular features of our face, such as like a nose, a mouth, or eyes, but rather it looks at all the parts of the face holistically. And this is quite similar to how this image-trained model functions. And so how we trained this was a data set of images, labeled images, and we just fed the machine learning model the pixels, and this is kind of looking at the entire face, and we had an accuracy of 60% using this model. On the other hand, we used something called facial landmarks. And so the accurate identification of facial landmarks is a process in which each part of the face has a certain number of landmarks. So there are 68 landmarks in total, as you can see in this image on the side. And they are mapped to the facial action units on the face, which is like the muscles on the face that correlate with certain emotions. And thus, because this is such a suitable representation of data, it significantly increases the accuracy of a model. And so in the same way that the previous model is similar to the fusiform part of your brain, this one is similar to the occipital face area in the brain, which recognizes the different parts of a face separately. So you see the eyes, which are mapped by 6 dots each, and then sees the mouth as an individual piece. And so this is what we are trying to show in this system. And so for this, we created an ANN model. This is similar to a shape prediction model, which is basically how we can predict, how we can identify a certain shape based on points on this shape. And we had an accuracy of 56% here, probably because we had less data. However, this is still pretty good accuracy. And I wanted to test how these two models could work together well. So I created these correlation heat maps in which I have the 6 emotions and also neutral. And I used both of my models in order to identify, this is a deepfake, which is basically they have emotions, or they have one person's face and they map the emotions on that person's face to a different person's face. So here you can see Elon Musk and deepfake of him. And so as you can see on this correlation map on the left, the diagonal, which is the correlation of the correlating emotions on the original and the deepfake video, it's a significantly stronger, so it's significantly more red than the one on the right, in which that one was the one that used the image-based model. And so I concluded that the image-based model picked up more subtle emotions actually. However, you can see that there's a lot of potential for these two models to complement each other due to the way that they recognize emotions differently. So for the landmark trained model, it's going to recognize the bigger emotions, while the image trained model recognizes the more subtle emotions. And so my second observation was that the function of the visual system in our brain involves multiple neural networks. And so the fusiform part plays a very important role in face recognition, but other parts of the brain, such as the amygdala, is also very sensitive to emotion recognition. And all of these parts together form the face perception network. And so how can we compose different machine learning models to better recognize emotions and faces? And therefore, I analyzed how these two models of an image trained model versus a landmark trained model, how they complement each other in different ways. So we created complementarity metrics for both of these models. And at the top here, you can see the two graphs for the emotions that were detected by these two models respectively. And based on these complementary metrics at the bottom, as you can see here, we can see that the overlap in true positives between these two models, which are 33% and 25%, since they are both less than 51%, we can conclude that these two models complement each other pretty well. And we hypothesize that one of these models may recognize emotions better for a certain individual based on how they express emotions. So for instance, if a certain individual expresses their emotions in more of a subtle way, then this may cause the image trained model to be better at finding emotions for that specific person. So that's my hypothesis. And the third observation comes from evolution and nature and biology, which my idea is inspired by an observation that adaptive processes allows organisms or a system of organisms to be better able to do things that they need to do. So if in the small discussion group context, if we use group emotion change cadence as a reference, we could build a system combining both machine learning models that could adaptively reduce the noise. And what I mean by that is how often a person's emotion changes over time. Right, so our goal is to adapt our model to recognize the major emotion changes of the individual while filtering out the other emotion changes, which could probably be attributed to noise or by errors in my models. And so that's, as you can see on the graphs to the right here, at the top left is the original graph that was produced. It's very noisy because as people speak, their face changes a lot, and therefore the emotion that is detected also changes a lot. When we filter out a lot of that noise, we can see a trend in the general emotion or like sentiment of a group. And so just quickly with like the technical stuff, we wanted to compute the noise level as a feedback system for the adaptive system. So irrelevant changes such as like the speaker, when the speaker is talking, there's a lot of noise, so we want to filter that out. And so what we did is we mapped it to a Fourier transform, and we removed the low energy frequencies, and this reflects like the major trends in emotion changes rather than like the frame-to-frame variance in emotion changes. And our goal is to create a system that can adapt to the individual and recognize when the individual is truly changing emotion rather than when the individual is speaking and there's just a lot of noise in the emotion that is produced. And so this is my system. I call it the adaptive facial emotion recognition, and it works specifically in small group discussions. So if I start off with a small group video stream, I first have the two machine learning systems that I use. So one detects the facial landmarks and produces an emotion from that using an artificial neural network, while the imaging processing system uses a convolutional neural network and thus can extract an emotion from that. And using both of these, I train a personalized model. And so the results from these two networks are processed through adaptive weights. And based on the specific individual and how often their emotion changes, I can determine which weight to give to each of these systems. And so I change the weights based on the individual expressions. Of course, in the middle, I reduce the noise. And then I produce a group emotion. And so if the group emotion is different from the individual emotion, then I can go back and adapt to see whether or not the individual was actually whether the individual emotion was an error or whether they were supposed to have the group emotion. And through that, I can create a system that adapts towards a specific individual, and this is a lot better at recognizing emotions. So these are some of the results for my adaptive system. So as you can see in the first test that I used, in a small group, I used like videos from Zoom where there was like 4 people having a discussion. So in the first test, the adaptive model took some time to adjust and recognize how individuals expressed emotions, but afterwards they were able to detect false positives of SAD that were in the normal model. And in the second test, the adaptive model could detect false positives of fear, as well as there was an angry emotion that was not previously detected. And I went back through the videos and I manually analyzed them and found that the adaptive model was indeed more accurate at showing the true emotion that I, as like a human, could recognize than the original system did. And so lastly, my observation is from statistics, which is that, or a mathematical observation, is that one of 2 strongly correlated variables could be used as a reliable predictor for the other. And so this is very helpful to help us build a better machine learning-based emotion recognition system, because it can provide a critical ground truth for us to create additional label training data. And so the thing about emotion recognition is that finding a ground truth is very difficult. It is not always possible to know the true emotion of a human. The individual themselves might not know what emotion they're experiencing. However, we found that emotions of individuals are often very correlated with the group's emotions, because if you're in a small discussion group and the group becomes happier, you will probably also become happier. And therefore, we thought that if group emotion can be an indicator of an individual's true emotion, we could use these to provide more labeled data for that individual, and therefore create a better system that is truly trained just for that individual. However, one, of course, drawback of the system is that we would require like a synchronous group, such as like knowledge sharing conferences, in order to know that the individual is indeed matching with the group sentiment, and therefore we would have confidence in labeling the additional data. And so here on the right, we can see the formulas that are used for the correlation. And so just as like a definition of like what I mean by like a synchronous group or like a homogeneous group versus like an engaged group. So an engaged group is a discussion group in which everyone is engaged, like no one's on their phone, no one's like visibly looking away from the discussion, and this can reveal information about these individuals. However, this does not necessarily mean that they are changing emotion at the same time, or that they are all experiencing the same emotion at the same time. And that's where asynchronous groups comes in. So a synchronous group basically, as I define, means that they change emotion at the same time. So for instance, if there's an event that happens in the discussion, all of them would change their emotion. And they may not change their emotion in the same way. So if something happens and one group member is very happy about this change, and another group member is very sad about this change, they could have opposite changes in emotions. However, this would still mean that they change emotion at the same time, so the cadence of their emotion changes are pretty similar. And homogeneous groups would share the same emotion, and this could probably be for situations such as like a movie, in which we can see that most people at least would have a similar experience of the emotions because they are all watching the same movie. And so labeling can directly benefit from group emotions in this situation because we can directly map an individual's emotions with the group sentiment. So this is the correlation analysis of my personal machine learning model. And so my thinking is that if the correlation between the individual and the group increases after creating a personalized system for the individual, this approach would most likely means that my adaptive system had better accuracy for that individual. And so this is one of the tests that I made. The automatically labeling system removed a false fear reading of the individual. And of course, in order for this to work, you must experience a wide range of emotions. So this would have to be over time that a machine learning model better understands an individual and how different emotions show up on an individual's face in order for this to become more accurate. And so one application of all of this is, I'm sure if all of you guys know, Mona Lisa. People always want to study the facial expression of Mona Lisa. Many people think she is smiling, but like, is she happy? Is she sad? What is going on with her emotions? And so this is a very elusive ground truth. We do not know how she is truly feeling at that time. So there's been much research about how she is actually feeling. So for instance, at the University of Cincinnati, neurologists, they manually analyzed her face and found that the left side of her face indicated happiness, while the left side displayed happiness, while the right side did not show any happiness. And so from this, we can see that it's a very confusing face that Mona Lisa is showing. And then there is a machine model-based tool from Microsoft in which they found that she was 43% happy, but 55% neutral. And there's another one that determined with FER dataset, which is like this huge emotion dataset, found that she was only 5% happy, and in fact there's 21% angry, 16% fearful, and 33% neutral. While fortunately most people's faces are not as mysterious as Mona Lisa's, we can see that emotions are actually very hard to recognize, and it's very difficult to find a ground truth in which we know what the individual is truly feeling. And especially since this shows up in all different ways on different people's faces, being able to identify how an individual is truly feeling is pretty important. And so this is my study. So there is this book called Leonardo's Hidden Face that suggests that Mona Lisa is actually a self-portrait of Da Vinci, and they did like their own research into this and how this could be. But here on the left you can see Da Vinci's self-portrait, and on the right is of course Mona Lisa. And my machine learning model suggests that they actually have a similar emotion mix. So they have quite similar percentages of like anger, disgust, fear, both like very small amounts of happiness, sadness, very similar amounts of surprise, as well as neutral. And so, of course, you would have to also analyze the art in this. But as you can see, when we as humans look at these faces, we could think that Da Vinci looks very sad. However, very sad, while like Mona Lisa has a smile, but my machine learning model says actually somewhat the opposite, that in fact Da Vinci is happier than Mona Lisa. And so here we can see how machine learning models are a lot more unbiased because they have so much data. They have seen lots of very old people and how they express emotions, and how very like young girls like Mona Lisa express emotions. And therefore they do not have this bias when recognizing emotions on people's faces. And some other things that you can take from this research, like why is emotion recognition, these are some like messages you can take from this research, which is like what makes emotion recognition important. Low level responses may not be aware in like your conscious mind, and having a machine learning system like help you better understand your emotions is like pretty important. And of course, having emotion yourself impacts your ability to recognize other people's emotion accurately, so machine learning may outperform humans in this. And of course, since this is all in small group discussions, as we can see, if you are able to interact with an individual in a small group, you may be able to better understand how that individual expresses their emotions. And so this is just an acknowledgement. I wanted to thank the Brain Power Institute for their guidance in this research, and also MIT Beaverworks Summer Institution. And that's my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Valentina. That was fascinating. I was literally sitting here, I'm like, wow, I hadn't even thought about Mona Lisa, but that's like the perfect application. I'm just sitting here like my mind is being blown. I'd never thought of that, but absolutely brilliant. I loved it. I want to like apply that to like a million other paintings. So our question for you is, you mentioned that being able to understand emotions will lead to AI becoming conscious. So how soon do you think this might happen, or maybe will a machine ever become fully conscious?
I personally don't believe that they will become truly conscious anytime soon. It could be like pretty soon actually that they have a better understanding of emotions and how humans understand emotions better than humans themselves do. However, I do think that consciousness is like pretty far way off, and like understanding emotions, especially since it's like a pretty low level response, doesn't lead to consciousness immediately.
Awesome. And I think we have time for another question. So I feel like one question I had for you is, when I first saw like the picture of Leonardo da Vinci, I'm like, oh my goodness, I think this AI is wrong. It's saying that Da Vinci's really happy, is happier compared to Mona Lisa. But your perspective was like, oh, actually, it's like this AI has seen a ton of data. Like the AI might actually be able to perceive it better than us. So I'd be curious, like, how did you like jump to that conclusion when I jumped to the opposite one?
I definitely came to the same conclusion as you did first. That was like, oh, like why is this like data like incorrect, or like why is my machine learning model saying this when obviously like I see this differently. But going back like through the data sets that I had trained my model on, you can definitely see that, like at least in my opinion, when I went back and look at the label data set that I trained my machine learning models on, you can see that there are certain like types of faces that just like seem angrier, especially in like the deepfake that I showed as well. The